my name is Ansa. I work as a senior scientist at the Natural Resource Institute Finland. Present location is Turku, but we have offices everywhere, and headquarters is in Helsinki. So we are a state research organization. And I have a strong background in soil microbiology and soil ecology in agricultural systems. And yeah, I'd like to introduce and tell you about this very fascinating work that the two farmers unions in Finland, Finnish and Swedish speaking unions, launched at the beginning of this year. So the projects started, the work lasted approximately 2 years, a bit more, has two parts, both the roadmap for biodiversity in Finnish agriculture and in forestry. And you can find it in Finnish and in Swedish from these links. And of course, you can contact me if you are interested. The work, the roadmap for biodiversity in Finnish agriculture. So this has two parts. So this is the group who did that work. Tero Hyvänen from Luke was coordinating it, and we covered very many parts of that biodiversity. I was responsible of soil biodiversity part, and that's what I am describing you mainly. Some pictures maybe show something else, but it was a big group and experts from Luke, Finnish Environmental Institute, and the University of Helsinki. And the overall aim was to propose measures for halting and reversing farmland biodiversity loss in Finland, and introduced alternative scenarios with the required measures for reaching the goal to reverse the biodiversity loss. And there were different time scales. The present time, that was when the project started, 22, and then scenario time points in 2030 and 2050. And very important precondition for the whole roadmap work was that these measures that we were proposing should not decrease the food production in Finland. So it was very important to keep at least this rather high level of self-sufficiency in food production in Finland, or rather increase that. There were several steps, and those in yellow is something that I'm telling you in this presentation about soil biodiversity. So we made some kind of overall estimation of the current state of agrobiodiversity in Finland, and we were identifying the drivers for this kind of biodiversity change. We constructed the scenarios, the base scenario, with existing measures, and then with additional measures, two different kinds, and explored with chosen indicators the changes. There were also the economical part, were calculation of costs, and also steering instruments, but I won't cover those parts in this presentation at all. So talking about soil biodiversity, we already heard interesting talk for this. So in Finnish agricultural soils, we seldom have moles. We rather have smaller animals. So earthworm is one of the biggest. It's called macrofauna in soil, but by far the biggest biodiversity and also the biomass is in microfauna or microbiome in bacteria, archaea, and fungi. And also there is so-called mesofauna that is living in the soil that can maybe seen in magnifying glass maybe, but otherwise difficult. And I just want to point out, we already discussed why the soil biodiversity is very important, and all interesting answers were present, but just it's good to keep in mind that the soil biodiversity, the organism in the soil, they are so important for our life, for our food production. They have very many different functions, very important functions, nutrient cycling, all the composition, both the organic matter, but also harmful substances. Also are key players in carbon sequestration that has been shown recently, are important in disease suppression or biocontrol. And it's good to remember that even though we have some pathogenic microbes, it's by far they are rather beneficial for plant growth. So plant growth promotion, very important. But also have an impact on soil structure, as we heard from, for example, earthworms, and also microbes are important in aggregate stability, for example. So our problem when starting this kind of roadmap for Finland was that there was lack of monitoring data. So there has been soil monitoring in Finland approximately once in 10 years already, several rounds. But recently there has been a decision to start also the soil biodiversity monitoring. And first something that where the analysis are being carried out was done in 2018. But there we will get data of soil microbiota. And next time there should be data also from soil fauna. And here in the map you see the present situation in Finland, all these kind of soil monitoring networks that we have now, and arable is this yellow. So we didn't have monitoring data. We did have some case studies, and like, for example, this Soil Diver Agro is Luke is also involved in that, and there will come interesting data. And there has been, of course, some case studies, but for such a roadmap, we need something that covers the whole agricultural system in the whole country. So we needed to think of indirect indicators for soil, because we wanted to include soil biodiversity because of it's so important for food production. And then later on, when there are monitoring data, more detailed data that can be included. So we wanted to start from somewhere. So we had to check the indirect indicators. So very, very big problem there. But this is the only picture I show you about the whole work that we were doing on agricultural systems. There were birds, insects, vascular plants, and soil organisms, and we had different habitats that we were checking. There were fields, but very important also the marginal areas, and then traditional biotopes that are very, very threatened. And if you look at this, so this was, we used many kinds of also monitoring or case studies data, mainly case study data. We didn't have any threatened species in soil, unlike with other organism groups, but we estimated that there is something somewhat decreased biodiversity in the fields, but otherwise our data didn't give that detailed information on the threats of soil biodiversity as such. But how we did then the scenario work, and how did we choose indicators? So as said, there were 3 different scenarios. Business as usual, it's called BEM scenario, continuing with existing measures, how it seems the future of agriculture and the measures, or 2 different scenarios with additional measures. One that more or less wanted to stop the diversity loss, and then where the biodiversity is clearly reversed with considerable additional measures. And for soil biodiversity, we chose indirect indicator that was very much based on article by Heikkinen and others, where they used the field parcel data on soil carbon and the farming, where they checked the years 2009 to 2018 from all the field parcels in Finland, the farming system there, and linked carbon or carbon loss or carbon content in those systems. Soil organic matter, soil organic carbon is very closely linked with soil biodiversity, but it's clear this is indirect indicator, but it shows sort of some kind of direction, how the soil biodiversity and soil biota is impacted. So before showing the indicator data, this is something what we used in the agricultural scenarios, the use of agricultural land. There were several assumptions that all the scenarios were using. The structural development and development of productivity will remain stable. So as it seems to go on at the moment. There were some drivers. Vegetarian dietary will increase, consumption of poultry meat will remain stable, and consumption of red meat, milk and milk products will decrease. That is what can be seen already. And therefore, in these different scenarios, the BEM was with existing measures, additional measures, and then even considerably strong additional measures. So you can see that the land use scenarios, the area of cereals and grasslands in every scenario will decrease. With these existing measures only slightly, but still that is how it seems to continue. Whereas other crops, area of other crops will go up. And in these different scenarios with additional measures, the set-aside areas and marginal areas will increase even stronger than in the existing measures. So these are the trends that can be seen, and these are the trends in the agricultural land use that was taken into account, and not much changes in the overall area of agricultural land was seen. So after quite impressive calculations carried out by Lauri Jauhiainen at Luke, using this field parcel data of farming systems, as was in Heikkinen and others paper, we had 5 different classes of agricultural land use, annual cereal monoculture, and annuals. So it's like a break crop, but not very big diversity there. Then annuals and perennials rotation, and this was calculated based on that time frame, 2009 and 2018. Annual and perennial rotation. Shannon index is the diversity index when it was higher, then we called it diverse rotation. And then fifth class was perennials. And of course, perennials is very much linked with animal husbandry and milk production. And these were used as indexes and was calculated based on field parcel data and also the development that was estimated based on the assumptions and earlier work by Lauri Jauhiainen and Pirjo Peltonen-Sainio. So the indicative values in these maps, you can see the colors. So the color red means more or less that mainly in these areas there are monoculture, cereal monoculture. And if you have blue, it's a constant perennial fields. And here is the existing measures scenario, starting point 22, and how it would develop if nothing additional measures were taking place. It's good to remember that there is also climate change that is changing the agriculture is behind. So it would seem that monoculture practices would increase, less grasslands, perennials, and that would clearly show worse scenario for soil biodiversity. And the biggest change can be seen in these areas, which are the main cereal production areas in Finland. There would be the cereal monoculture would be practically non-existing anymore. There would be break crops at least, and different kinds of set aside practices as well. So if we look at this index as one number, it would look like that existing measures would look a bit bad for soil and soil biodiversity. But with these additional measures, it seems that in the longer run, it's possible to maintain the soil biodiversity as it is, or even clearly improve it if we make strong measures. So this was sort of promising, looking also back and to the future. It is possible to reverse the biodiversity decline, even if there is the climate change that makes the work even more topical. Practices, as was in the earlier presentation, not very special kinds of innovative, except outside of those calculations that were quite amazing somehow. It seems that for biodiversity, it's important not to have monoculture, have rotations and diversified cropping systems, not much plowing, also other agroecological farming measures that was also mentioned there, like cover crops, organic matter, maintaining soil pH, not much pesticides. So they all are important for soil biodiversity. Also increase of perennial grassland, semi-natural grassland and set-asides. It's also good for soil biodiversity, and also the marginal areas. They can be like overwintering areas for soil animals and giving that biodiversity there. So it is also promising to see that the current agricultural production can be retained, even if some agricultural land would be directed for producing environmental benefits. So that's also good to remember that that is also very important, and we could maybe rethink a little bit. It's important to produce food, but it's also important to take care of the environment and also the soil. And when thinking of biodiversity measures, I think it's something that we all share, that it needs to be something, it's not the farmers that should pay the bill, but it needs to be somehow economically attractive. And that's why that's challenge to think how do we do this work of improving soil biodiversity. And I think this kind of roadmap work is very valuable to make it visible. So thank you very much.